All right, so we're going to get into it. Today, Eileen and I will be talking about midlife, crisis or opportunity. I just want to walk you through the agenda very quickly. We're going to give you a quick overview of who we are. And then what we're going to do is we want to hear who you are and what brought you today. Then we're going to start to break apart the topic. We're going to look at midlife opportunities, midlife challenges, and kind of some pieces that what you can do. So we're going to do a little work today in this time that we're going to spend together. So first off, let me introduce myself. At 64, I faced a corporate merger. I'd been in marketing for over 30 years. It was a merger. By that time, I already realized that I didn't want to stay in marketing any further. And I had found some things that had interested me along the way. A lot of it was in the leadership and coaching space. So I realized that at some point I had this I need to make a pivot. And then what I did is I started taking certifications and coaching courses and books and things like that. And then when I got into it, I actually registered with Columbia. I went back to their coaching. They have a coaching program. I was in the middle of the program when I got packaged out of corporate. And so after that, I finished my coursework at Columbia. I started my own coaching practice, Motivating Factors, and co-partnering with Eileen. Daunting at times, some days it still is, but I know I made the right choice because I could no longer do marketing. So that's what led me through, my pivot points. And now I'll let Eileen introduce herself.
Thank you. Hello, everyone here in the room and on the screen. I'm so glad you came today. I'm Eileen Springer, and my background is I have 30 plus years of experience in large corporations in human resources, primarily on the talent acquisition, talent management, and learning and development side. And after all of those years in corporate and nice, steady, secure jobs in investment banking, hospitality, and technology, I started feeling less satisfied in my work and ready for a new challenge. And I also went the year-long program at Columbia for certification in executive coaching. And as hokey as it sounds, after my first day there, I said, this is exactly what I was meant to do, and the time is now. So at 54, I made a big career change and I transitioned out of the corporate world and I started Central Park Executive Coaching. And then I also learned from my educational experience at Columbia that I really enjoyed research, writing, as well as leading workshops and seminars like this one. So created Your Next and co-founded that with Christine, and we've been having a lot of fun. So that's a little bit about my background, and I'm very happy to be here talking about midlife with you all today.
When you hear the term midlife and you hear the term crisis or opportunity, what kind of words come to mind? I'm gonna write them in here. What kind of words come to mind when you hear midlife?
Confusion.
Confusion. I'm a bad speller by now. I might spell Confucius. Anyone else? And feel free to come off mic if you're virtually with us today. But what other words come to mind? Confusion.
Maybe I'm trying to think of the word, but almost like you're running out of time, maybe, or
okay.
Like that feeling.
Good. Anything else? Marie?
Not valuing yourself.
Good. Not value. That's an interesting one.
The need for change.
Need for change.
You can also drop them in the chat because I'll be able to vocalize those.
Okay, well, that's all right. I've got this far. I'm very proud of my annotating skills. Any other words? What comes to mind?
Maybe ageism.
Reinvention. I'm sorry, I missed the last one.
I said maybe ageism. I know it's a negative.
Ageism, yeah.
Too late.
Too late.
And reflection.
Reflection, good. Good, nice. Any other words before we move on? Kind of a lot of in between, right? Not a lot of definition of what you're gonna do. Okay, thank you for that. So we're gonna take you through this today. And I'm going to close my annotating, and we're going to go here, and now my annotating. How do I get rid of the annotating? Erase, right? Sorry.
I think you're gonna have to erase it.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
Good. So midlife doesn't have to be a crisis, right? And if you Google it, when you Google midlife, they start throwing age at you. Everybody thinks it's a number, right? It's, it's 35 to 55, it's 40 to 65. It's, some people think midlife is half, right? It's like that half point of when you die, but the problem is we don't actually have that data, do we? So the idea is we want to reframe it today. And what we want to be able to do is take the number away from it, because it really is less about age and it's more about where you're at this point. And the reason that we picked this topic is that Eileen and I talk to a lot of professional women. We do a lot of work with group coaching for women executives. And what we found is that when people have a certain amount of experience and they've done certain things, some of them are like, some people are like, they're going to keep on, but some of them may say, they take their foot off the accelerator and go, not feeling it, not for me. So the idea is that we speak to a lot of people who've had a little bit of experience and they've had some, some success in their life, but they're not getting the satisfaction that they need. The big thing is what's next? Where do I need to go next? And how do you find that? And how do you know? How do you really know if you're at that point? So our work for today is going to be around how we frame this, okay? How are we going to think about this as an opportunity? And framing and mindset is a really key thing, because there are steps and things we can take wherever we are to start to think about what is the next, right? When you talk to career counselors and other people, they'll tell you, you always want to think 2 steps out, right? It's not about the very next job, but it's like, where does that job take you? Because your next job is really on a turntable. It's a pivot, right? Where are you going to go? So what we are going to do is we're going to invite you today to think about this and how you want to reframe it for yourself. And we're going to do some work, a little bit about how do you break that apart to think about what may gel. You're not going to walk out of, you may walk out of here with an epiphany, but you may not. But the idea is you will know how you can reframe this if you choose to. So with that, for those of you who are virtual, we did hand out some notebooks, and I would invite you to put your email in the chat and your address, and we'd be happy to send you some notebooks after that. It's a 100-page notebook, by the way, just so you know. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eileen.
Great, thank you, Chris. So what we're going to do in the next few minutes is we're going to just talk about some steps you can take to enhance your health and your well-being for the future. And although Chris and I are executive coaches, so we're typically coaching individuals on thinking about their career, I want to say I'm glad Linda is here as a health coach, because research does show that when you look at a person holistically, you can't just look at one dimension of just something like career, that this mindset and this approach can affect one's health and well-being as well. Okay. So as we look at midlife, there is an opportunity to think about midlife as a time of revitalization, positive change, and renewed purpose. And when we did our study on this, we found that there were 3 key steps that is advised that one would take to get the most of midlife. The first of which is to engage with verve. So what does that mean? Whether it's family, community, career, self-improvement, it's about getting to a mindset of cherishing the good moments and writing out the bad, and seeing that as a worthwhile pursuit. The second of which, and let me just say in terms of engaging with verve, it actually becomes a little easier to do when you get to midlife, because oftentimes your children are leaving home. I think a couple of us were just talking about that that's just happened. Or on the not so positive side, either you as an individual or even a partner may have survived a health scare. But regardless of the experience, these are the experiences that can help you gain a different perspective as you move into the next phase of life. The second step is around choosing purpose over happiness. And this is about pursuing long-term goals that give your life meaning versus something short term that may give you a burst of happiness that isn't sustaining. So thinking about choosing purpose and thinking of that more strategically and longer term. So what Chris and I see are a lot of clients that are moving to second acts in their career, and they're specifically choosing roles at this phase of life, such as teaching, working in a nonprofit, or some sort of second career that's bringing improvement to their community or to the greater world. And they may not have had those opportunities before. They may not have felt the same importance around them that they're feeling now. And then the third step to take is thinking in the context of your thinking is your experience. So what do we mean by that? What we mean is your attitude towards success or adversity plays a large part in your happiness. So it's literally implying that your thoughts affect your experience. And let me give you an example of that. You may have one person who's been forced to retire and are now feeling dissatisfied. They may have a smaller pension, or they may not like the fact that they didn't have control over the timing of that kind of change. And then you can have a different person here who's feeling grateful about the fact that they're now freed up to work part-time and has time for other things in their life, or now free to use those skills toward another purpose or with a different organization. And that's what we mean by your thoughts affect your experience. So those are three aspects toward being able to have this more positive experience. But with that said, let's be real. There are a lot of challenges that come in life. And none of this is meant to imply that it's all going to be rosy, right? But what we don't want to do is let those challenges consume us, and we want to go into this armed with strategies that are going to help us cope with that. So I think we all know what sandwiching is. Probably most of us are experiencing that now, and that's being part of the sandwich generation, where you may be raising kids while also being saddled with the care of aging parents. And this typically ranges in age for people affected by this from their 40s through their 60s. I personally have in recent years been very much, squarely in this category. And I can tell you it's very demanding, very challenging. And most adults that are in this phase are averaging about 2.5 hours a day of unpaid work caring for a family member. Another challenge is waning skills. And the reality is that you hone these skills in early adulthood that eventually start to wane. And if you don't focus on your abilities that grow as you get older, you might start to perceive aging as unmitigated loss. And this is what can cause a lot of suffering for people. And as we think about this, we want to make sure that we're continuing to expand our abilities or recreate our abilities and skills. Another truth that you can't get away from is that we all have aging brains. And this happens to everyone. Your brains actually start to shrink as you age. And a natural outcome of that is that your mind starts to wander. So we've all had that experience where you walk into another room to retrieve something, you get to the room, and then you forget why you went there, right? I mean, this has happened to everyone. And there are other things that start to change. A very common one is hearing loss. And it's proven that with hearing loss, that it actually causes a decline in your cognitive skills. But here's the good news is that your brain actually compensates by using different regions and pathways and starts to rely more on your experience and your knowledge. So by you participating in things such as reading, walking, exercising, as I'm sure Linda knows, socializing, doing crossword puzzles, or even just learning new things. These are the things that keep your brain humming. So we always want to think about how can we keep creating those new pathways. And then finally, a harsh reality is loneliness. Having strong social networks becomes even more important as you age for both mental and physical health. And unfortunately, COVID has really amplified this for all ages, quite frankly. And, prior to being at this phase, one may have lived a very charmed life. If we were lucky enough to have lived a charmed life before now, eventually some of these challenges will come about. It may be illness, it may be divorce, it may be financial worries. But there are coping skills for this, such as creating scenarios. And this would be creating scenarios for what would be the worst that could happen and what could be the best that could happen. And then starting to recognize what those possibilities are and creating a plan for them. So again, while there are many challenges, and I'm sure you all could probably add other challenges to this list, there's also strategies that you can address for each of them to help make midlife a more positive phase of life. And there are two key decisions that you can make to keep midlife at bay. The first is to choose generativity versus stagnation. And what this really means is to focus on what age gives you, not what it has taken away. Okay? What does age give you, not takes it away? So generativity means it's an opportunity to apply your unique skills and experiences for the greater good. Stagnation happens when you try to fight time and struggle with those changes. And stagnation is what leads to crisis. When you're trying to fight against time, whether you're trying to look younger or struggling against changes in your skills and strengths, that's what makes things really hard and makes you start to spiral, right? And then the second decision one can make is to choose subtraction versus addition. And this is to reframe the belief that success equals more and embrace stepping away from responsibilities to focus more on yourself. So when we're younger, those of us that are ambitious, and I have a feeling everyone here probably is, they start to equate success with more money, more responsibility, a bigger title, a bigger house, more notoriety, whatever it happens to be. And to choose subtraction means you're making a conscious decision to make more time to think, to love, to read, to pray, whatever it may be. So now let's consider some important questions to ask as we think about choosing more generativity and more opportunities for subtraction.
So what we're going to do is, those of you in the chat, we've sent a worksheet. And for those of you here in the room, where we put together a worksheet just to get you started in this frame of mind of generativity versus subtraction. And the idea is to pick a point in time. 5 years ago, where would you put generativity? What would you write down in that column? And then subtraction. And I would do it for right now. You can do it for as long as you want. You can go as far back as you want to, or you can go far into the future. But for purposes of how to do this, the piece is we've asked you to think about 5 years ago, where you are today, and then also 5 years from now. So Eileen's going to pose some of these questions. And then the idea is list those things that you would put under generativity and put some things that you would want to take out now of your life. And there are things when you were younger that you would take away too, right? You would, there are certain interests that you would pursue, but you didn't. So think about where you've added and where you've subtracted for 5 years, where you are now, and 5 years in the future.
So what I'll do is I'm going to pose some of these questions around generativity, and then I want to open it up for a little dialogue to hear what you're thinking about generativity. Maybe some of the things that you've already experienced or some of the things that you'd still like to try to do. So when you think about these questions, what are your unique skills and experiences that you can apply for the greater good? What passions do you want to pursue? Who do you want to be as you age? Note here, the question is not posed, what do you want to do? Who do you want to be when you age? How do you want to spend your time? Do you have a sense of purpose? And are your relationships strong?
So take a moment and think about that and share with us, if you would, any pieces either 5 years ago, currently, or maybe into the future of skills and experiences you'd like to bring forward, skills and experiences you might have left behind, passions, anything that comes to mind that relates to you where you are. So I will kick this off just to give somebody a little bit of a thought prompt. When I was in my 40s, I used to be really good. Linda will appreciate this. I loved weightlifting. I would probably kill myself with a baseball bat or a tennis racket, but I was very good at it. When I got into my 50s, it let me slide. I let it slide. It wasn't until I actually fell down, face planted in Rome, Paris, London, and New York City on 24th Street. And all of a sudden I realized I've lost something. I've lost some strength, I've lost balance, I've lost something. And so now it's like I've addressed that. And as my going forward piece, weightlifting becomes my non-negotiable. That is the one non-negotiable. So it's things like that. So that's a personal piece, but there have been skills for, Marie, I'm sure you get this too. It's like the marketing piece that you might have left behind, or how do you want to flip that and move forward to help other people? So I'm going to open it up for discussion if anyone has examples.
I'm happy to jump in and share that one of the things that I discovered by taking a different path, particularly through school, is that I had a passion for writing, but it wasn't something I felt I could ever take the time to do when I was still in the throes of child rearing and working in a more traditional corporate role. But now being able to do something that allows me to write and combine it with a new career has been very rewarding, and a way of, I feel like, expressing this generativity and giving back and sharing some of my insights with others. One thing I was just going to note on that piece, as well as being connectors, COVID has changed the dynamic for a lot of things. So in that scenario, COVID can be a positive and a negative. A positive can be there's more that can be accessed online in the time that you have available. But the negative is it brings along a lot of other responsibilities, particularly with the elderly in a COVID world, which unfortunately we're still living in to some degree. But I did want to just echo what Chris said about being a connector. Don't ever take that for granted, because it's such a gift you're giving to someone else. And there are more people that are not good at networking than are good. So being able to distinguish yourself and give that gift to others is very important and special. So something to feel good about. Let's talk a little bit about choosing subtraction as we're preparing for midlife. Thinking about what would you prefer to have less of? What voluntary duties and responsibilities can you step away from? Have you noticed a change in your energy level? Do you get enough sleep? I have to say, I don't know anyone in midlife that says they get enough sleep. Do you crave more time for yourself? What would you do with more personal time? And which relationships bring about stress? So this is about subtraction. Would anyone like to share something they'd like less of? Or any of these other questions?
One of the bigger pieces, I think, is as women, we're so used to taking on so much stuff. I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. But it really becomes a challenge. And stepping down from those activities that other people can or should learn from. You know, it's like, I know that I'm going into a phase where I am really trying to pare back some of the volunteer stuff that I do and getting off a board that I've been on. And really finding more time to figure out, and, you know, so I can add to my generativity side, right? Because I want to do more writing and researching and coaching and things like this, but I got to let something else go, right? It's that fine balance of scale and finding more personal time. It's really hard if you want to sit and do nothing. It's like, I didn't do anything. It's, you
And being
know,
okay with it.
you have to be, exactly, thank you. You have to be okay with it, because if you don't create space, nothing's gonna come in, right? Nothing is gonna come in.
Has anyone noticed a change of energy level?
Yeah, the more I exercise, the more energy I have.
That's good.
That's good. Any other final thoughts? Anything else resonating? I do want to just, before we wrap, I do want to just put a little pin in the question, do you have a sense of purpose? Because people aren't necessarily born with purpose. Yes, there were the virtuosos and things, but I didn't, you know, I didn't wake up and at age 5 and say, I'm going to be a coach and I'm going to go into marketing. I had about 30 other different ideas before I even got to that. But purpose is something that you find and you work with, and it comes with practice and experimentation. So if you say, oh, crikey, I don't have a purpose right now, give yourself permission to start to explore and try new and different things. And give yourself enough time with something that's new and different to know if you really like it versus you're getting frustrated because you're not good at it, right? It takes a lot of practice to do things, and then you say, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. But it's because give yourself a little bit of permission to play with that if you still are struggling with purpose. And purpose changes. Who you are at 20 is not who you are at 40, who's not going to be who you are at 60. And with that, any other thoughts or questions, Eileen?
Thanks. I'll just pose a question to you in closing, and for you to think about, based on some of this discussion today, is what you can do, even small steps, to go forward confidently. Even if you think of one action that'll really make a difference for you around generativity or subtraction, that'll make a difference for you now. Make a personal commitment to yourself for one of those. And again, the worksheets can help you think about it in more of a time frame. But if there's one thing in the here and now that you can do, we encourage you to do that.
We appreciate your time. We know everybody's time is valuable, particularly if you came and drove here today. But also for the time commitment for people who are with us virtually, because you're virtually, because after you turn off this, I'm sure there's other things you were jumping to. So with that, we just want to thank you. We've got quite a few articles about midlife and work on our websites, and we invite you to, check it out. Any other questions are online before we end officially at 102? 102.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Have a great day.